Now we're going to start from the bottom up before we get to that Senator Natasha Akpoti Uduaghan's story. According to the Tinubu government, Nigeria's economic outlook for 2025 is generally positive, with projected moderate GDP growth, lower, more tapered inflation, and a more stable exchange rate. But how much might that growth be constrained by economic pressures, by suboptimal execution of policies, reversals of reforms, and other vulnerabilities? The Nigerian economy delicately poised, of course, in 2025. And the question is, what sort of impact is all this likely to have on households, businesses, and pocketbooks in a country where the average person has been battered by higher food and fuel prices, the erosion of real incomes, the significant depreciation of the naira, and a rising cost of living crisis? Well, for more on this, and keeping in mind that Nigeria has been relegated to 4th place on the list of African countries by economic size, I'm joined now in the studio by President Tinubu's Special Advisor on Economic Affairs, Tope Fasua. Good to see you, Tope.
Good to see you too. Thank you very much.
I should say Happy New Year. I haven't seen you this year.
Oh, yes. Thank you very much.
How delicately would you say that Nigeria's economy is poised in 2025?
Well, you know, it's not particularly very, wise to brag, especially when it comes to economic affairs. Because, of course, like you noted, there are quite a number of variables, that we battle with on a constant basis. But I'd say that I personally project the economy to perhaps it's going to do better than it's done in the last 10 years in 2025. And there are reasons for that. You reeled out a few of our expectations for the year. Per the budget, we project 4.6% growth, which, even the 3.84% that we achieved in the last quarter of last year was the highest in 3 years. So if we were going to do 4.6%, it's going to probably be the highest in about 5 years that we've seen.
How are you going to achieve 4.6%? I mean,
the
fact remains that the naira is persistently weak. Food and fuel prices remain elevated. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's exacerbated by the severe cost of living crisis. Real incomes are continuing to erode. I mean, they're not enough.
You seem not to be taking in consideration of the improvements that we've seen so far. For example, on the naira, I mean, there was once that it got to 1,900. Of late now, we've been looking at the naira at 1,450, 1,480. Lost a bit of ground in the last day or two, but we've seen very strong growth in the naira. Whereas we're more concerned with having a stable currency more than the strengthening currency. There's no point to prove. At the current levels where the naira is now, we've hit an inflection point, and behavioral changes are starting to occur. More people are buying local, people are producing more, and this is showing in the economy. Industrial sector growth was about at least 2% for the last quarter. We expect a lot more, and we can see the sectors of the economy that are doing incredibly well. The agri sector, the trade sector, the export sector. We've had 5 consecutive quarters of trade surpluses. Is remarkable. 5 consecutive quarters, in fact, record trade surpluses that we've seen. And if you see like what's gone on in the petroleum sector, now Nigeria is a net exporter. We saw that the Dangote refinery exported quite a bit of jet fuel to Saudi Arabia, no less. And so we've changed the story from this country that produces so much of crude oil and couldn't refine a single liter, to a country that can refine its crude oil and send abroad, and that has transformed entire sectors. Not only the petroleum sector, the sectors that are linked to the petroleum sector, we're seeing some domino effect indeed. So I would say that our projections are good. Projection is to land inflation at 15%. We're at 24.8% now after the rebasing of the inflation, which was done 6 years after it ought to have been done anyway. With no apologies for that. It's just about knowing where we stand on things.
Well, that's a dramatic. That's a dramatic. I'm not talking about the rebasing. I'm talking about going from 24 point something percent to 15%.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, that's almost
it's not going to be
absurdly
not
high
necessarily. I'll give you
in terms of your
there's
expectations.
there's an economy that actually mirrors Nigeria's a lot, which is the Pakistani economy. They were around 40% last year, down 2.5% now on inflation. It's doable. All you have to do is to know where the pressure points are. You mentioned food inflation, and of course, we've seen that reduction to 26% now. Well, you could call that still high, but last year we had a bumper harvest. Already this year is looking good. The projections are that we're going to have another bumper harvest. And there's one thing that I'm also monitoring on the international scene. There seems to be some discussion around the devaluation of the CFA, which is the currency spent by all of our neighbors. One of the things that happened last year was because of the depreciation of the naira. A lot of our food was bought over by our neighbors. You can't blame them. All of a sudden, the naira that used to be stronger than their CFA, became cheap, and therefore, as our crops were coming out, they were buying up in the borders and so on. If the CFA would be devalued, that advantage will reduce. Whereas we have also been capacitated to produce a whole lot more. So one thing people need to know is that, look, when a country is passing through some of those challenges and the kind of reforms that we did last year and 2 years ago, you get stronger innately, because people realize that, the panic button gets triggered. You're trying to produce more, trying to be more resilient and so on. And I think that's what we're going to see. So inflation at 15%, I wager that we're going to do better than that. By December.
I think you're a very good economist.
I try.
And you and I have had very good conversations in the past. But I'm wondering what planet you're on at the moment. Because, with all due respect,
right.
The reason I say that is that you sometimes, you economists, sit in a room and you're crunching numbers. And the numbers have got absolutely nothing to do with the reality of the average person on the street, whose income has not changed.
Okay, I'll take you
who
up on
has
that.
continued to, in fact, the buying capacity has eroded considerably. And the problem is that the narrative that you guys came up with when you started your reforms of short-term pain for long-term gain isn't working.
It is, actually.
It's being met with increasing skepticism. Just talk to people on the streets. I'm not talking about sitting in a television studio. Actually go and feel the pulse of the people.
Mr. Charles.
It's not, let me just make the point and then you can have enough time. It's being met with increasing skepticism because no one seems to know what the duration, number one, of the short-term pain will be, and the extent to which Nigerians are going to have to endure this economic strain. So they need to see tangible signs of improvement, not figures or numbers on a computer, but where it really matters. Rising income, falling inflation, falling prices. If you don't have that, the risk of reform fatigue will increase.
Absolutely. I get your point. And on all the points, there's empirical evidence to show that what you have, the statement you've made is off the mark in some ways. The president, right now we're running on a minimum wage of 70%. We're coming from 70,000. We're coming from 30,000.
Yeah, but a lot of people still aren't getting that 70,000.
They've started to get it.
I'm sure you know.
Many of the states are paying 80,000.
A lot of people are not getting it.
Some 74, some 75. And of course, it's a fait accompli. If it wasn't paid,
you're saying you're an economist.
They'd have to backdate and pay from the point that it was agreed.
You're an economist. You deal with figures. What percentage of people are getting that 70,000?
Oh, well, fine.
Today?
First of all, that this 70% minimum wage is actually coming from the government side of things. But also, it governs what happens in the private sector. However, some of the players in the private sector are a bit slow. I, for one, for example, I'm also a private sector player. I've got drivers, I've got people who work for me and so on. I've made that payment for months now. increased even beyond that level for months now. And I think most people are. Many of the banks have actually started to do that since last year as well. So that's private sector, not to talk of the public sector, including the state level. So for one, I'm telling you, well, you are a little bit less on the street than I am, I would say, because yes, actually, I'm very much on the street. I go to market, I interact with the people, I take a walk around. I don't guide myself with all of the appurtenances and so on of office. So essentially speaking, so on wage, people are getting that now. I'd say if I give it a ballpark, I'd say that 40 to 50% of people are beginning to get that. And I was on another station recently, and I also admonished people that we in a capitalist system such as we run, sometimes you have to speak up for yourself and negotiate. So I'm admonishing the private sector players that look, you have to kick in, because a number of them, if not all of them, who are in viable businesses have been able to mark up what they sell. That's why the inflation is there. The inflation is there because people have increased prices.
That's a good point.
And so because they've increased prices, they also need to increase the wages of their people, because that's where the tire hits the tarmac. And put some money in people's pockets. And I'm saying that indeed, Nigerians are beginning to earn on a different level than what they were earning, especially for organized private sector
there's nothing
players
you can do,
and the public sector.
There's nothing you can do, is there, about those price increases? Because, for example, if you look at the rate of inflation, inflation rises by a few percentage points, but a lot of businesses raise their prices by some of them over 100%.
Absolutely. Well, that happens to be something we saw in the middle of last year when the reforms were kicking in. And I probably will say it's a sort of a Nigerian thing, because we're not used to little leaps in this country. So whereas inflation went up to 34.8%, but people who sell stuff that people cannot do without, we saw an increase of 150%, 200% in some places. That's where sometimes moral suasion also kicks in. Consumer protection also kicks in. It's valid. We have a Federal Consumer Protection Agency also doing its work. It's valid for them to step in.
But it clearly isn't doing the work. Because if it was, the prices wouldn't be where they are. I mean, you admitted that a lot of the private sector are raising prices dramatically. And that's part of the problem. So how is the consumer?
A number of them were tackled, whereas we're not into price fixing, but a number of them were tackled. And of course, there's a simmering period. And if you've checked the newspapers of recent, you probably discover that prices of food are falling across the board in Nigeria. And in fact, it's a very interesting phenomenon, but it's real. Maybe because some of the goods have come into harvest as we speak. For example, things like beans, on rice. These are the staple that Nigerians eat, like rice, because of the strategic importation of rice that's been done. The prices have tapered a little bit, and many of the fruits are in season as we speak.
So let me say
in fact, just a second. People were expecting that because it's Ramadan season, and in Ramadan season, prices seem to go up because people buy in bulk to keep for the fasting. But for the first time in a long time, what we're finding out is empirically, I'm giving you this, and you could send someone out there to go and check it out, prices of food is falling.
Well,
and we're expecting that also to pull down inflation in general.
A lot of people buy food that they don't cook.
Okay.
So people go to, the booker on the street, the restaurants, all kinds of places to have their lunch or to have their dinner.
Right.
The prices at those places have quadrupled. I'm sure you're aware of that. But
they're stabilized
now. So the only way that people can... No, they haven't stabilized.
They have.
You go have dinner where we're sitting now. I'm not talking... I am giving you an example. I'm giving you an example because a lot of what I eat is actually from the street.
Right.
And if you go out there, what used to cost 6,000 naira is now costing about 13,000 naira.
Right. Okay.
That's a fact.
I mean, that's the posh restaurant.
So it's not a posh restaurant. I'm talking about places that you just go.
I eat in Guarimpa on the street.
Go to a lot of places. Go to your regular Kilimanjaro restaurant. Go to a lot of those places.
Yes.
Those places have quadrupled the cost.
They've
so
stabilized.
the point I'm making, you're saying stabilize. I don't understand
because
what
it's
you're
about
talking
stability. You see, the phenomenon of inflation. Indeed, what we're talking about right now is, look, that inflation, the prices cannot be increasing in leaps. The phenomenon of inflation is that at some point in time, you don't increase anymore because there's no point increasing anymore. So you get to the limit. We agreed right here that, look, a number of people who sell things in Nigeria took advantage to increase prices inordinately, even beyond the general inflation rate.
But what that means is that it doesn't matter what you. The point is that it doesn't matter what that means, and you've admitted that is going on. What that means.
It went on. I'm saying
it is going on. What that means is that it doesn't matter what you say here. That's why I said to you.
And it's important.
That's why I said to you. You're sitting in a room with a computer, crunching out numbers.
Well, that's not the only thing.
No, I know that. What I'm saying is that is what it comes across as, because you're saying that these things have stabilized and so on.
They have stabilized.
On what basis are you saying?
Mind you, the number of goods that are sampled over 900 goods, including transportation. There was a time the transportation went up. Now we're talking of petroleum prices falling almost on a daily basis. It's not the time that people increase the price of transport. Rather, you'd probably see a scenario where the price of transport will drop because we expect further drop in the price of petrol. That's the thing. So when the petrol prices went up significantly, we saw that. I'm saying to you, especially petrol seems to be a very important barometer for Nigeria. Every time the petrol price goes up by 50 naira, everybody wants to increase. That hasn't been the situation. So you have to admit that and take that in, that because petroleum prices are falling in Nigeria, equally people don't have the incentive, per se, to continue to increase the prices of goods.
The
that's
challenge.
the thing. You're going to see, and I'm telling you this, if you went on this day, 2 days ago, front page news, prices are falling despite the fact that there's Ramadan, And you know what? This discussion we're having is very important because that's what's called inflation expectation. If we repeat by rote what the people say, it depends on which people you're speaking to, but I'm also speaking to a set of people and I'm seeing the numbers and I'm getting on the street because I go to the market myself.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
Well,
and I'm saying to you that we're seeing stability, and when I say that, it triggers something that, look, everybody that's selling something that's watching us today realize that, look, this is the time to be stable on prices
it seems
rather than
to
the time to panic.
It seems to me that you being the government, I mean, you are a special advisor to the president on economic affairs, that you're caught in between a rock and a hard place. Because if you continue to pursue further critical reforms, while Nigerians are still, and you still need critical reform to get this economy ticking. If you continue to pursue those critical reforms further, while Nigerians are still in the throes of grappling with the current economic hardships, you risk further public discontent, don't you? And an even bigger backlash. So if you go to people and say, oh, well, the cost of this particular good when we came in was 500 naira. Today it's 1,200. But we've managed to bring it down to 1,100. What significant difference does that make to the person whose income has not significally increased?
Now, so what has happened is that because of those reforms, for example, the states, I mean, I just checked this today, I just checked the news, and in the FAC, Federal Accounts Allocation, I think about 2.4 trillion was shared for last month. What that means is that the states are getting 3 times what they used to get in Naira. And if they're getting that, I can tell you quite a number of them are actually doing well in terms of their liquidity. That means that they're paying their salaries on time, they're paying pensions on time, and we're also beginning to see an explosion of local infrastructure, of rural infrastructure. And that's what I think really, really matters. The small roads, the small bridges that could be made and so on.
You see, the things you're talking about,
they're putting money in the pockets of the common man. That's the most important thing.
The things you're talking about,
right,
Tope, sound very ad hoc.
Oh, no, why?
I mean, you're saying that there's this, that. I mean,
no, not necessarily.
There needs to be a comprehensive, cohesive growth.
I'm trying to convince you
and
now,
I'm wondering,
because you're out of the loop.
No, but you and I, we've had these conversations many times. Let me just make the point, and then you can.
Then I'll respond.
I was talking about a comprehensive, cohesive growth. I mean, and I'm wondering how the economy will grow significantly when you've got high interest rates.
Right, exactly.
Which manufacturers simply can't afford.
High interest rate, yes.
And you've got low consumer demand because consumers don't have disposable income.
Right, exactly. So thank you very much for, great questions and so on. So I'll probably put it this way. So the reforms the key reforms are around the petroleum sector and the Naira. And in allowing the Naira to float and to find a certain level around where it is now, 1,400, 1,500, great stuff. Many of our revenues are coming in foreign exchange, meaning that as much as coming in foreign exchange, we're able to, convert to Naira, and, we have quite a substantial amount of money. That's on the Naira. On the petroleum side, we're no longer hearing about subsidies taking money out of the government's pocket and so on, and right now, we also, to make that a double joy for the country, we also now have refineries working within the country. What that means is that all of a sudden we have a lot of money to play with in Naira and to fulfill our obligations. Most importantly, to put money in the pockets of our people.
Can I come in there?
The money, no, you can't now. I'm sorry. You can't now.
Okay, you take the floor.
Take it over.
I'll put my feet up
So now what's going on now? I have to convince you, and that's why I'm here.
Yeah, go ahead.
That indeed, because
I would like you to convince
these two scenarios that are painted is what is putting money in people's pockets. I'm saying that the states are getting ×3 what they used to get. The federal equally is getting that significant kind of... The local government, in fact, the president has brought a reform to say, you know what, we have to open up the local government. That's the same idea. To say, let's give them their money directly, so that the money can go directly into the pockets of the people at the grassroots. Now, you meet a random person on the street, people seem wired to want to say, oh, the world is falling on us. In fact, it's a terrible country and all of that. Well, perhaps if you could prod a little bit further, you'll find out that a number of people are earning twice what they used to earn last year. A number of companies are earning that much. A number of companies are earning twice what they used to earn in Naira. We're not talking about dollars.
If they're earning twice,
right?
And what was the value of the Naira
exactly
when you came into office, and what is the value today?
You've just actually played into my best territory. I'll give you a discussion on purchasing power parity. The fact that, look, at the end of the day, what really matters is the Naira. 70% of what matters, 70% of our spend is in Naira, not the dollar. This is Nigeria, not the United States of America. So as far as your Naira can take you, let's run. People are taking decisions, not to buy the imported goods as much as possible as before, and so on and so forth. So to a large extent, I think that, I would rather focus on the positive of what's going on.
Of course, you'd rather focus on the positive. It makes you and your government look better, doesn't it?
Not necessarily. It makes Nigeria better because, like
it
I
makes
said
you
before,
look better. It doesn't make Nigeria better.
It makes Nigeria better.
There's a big difference.
There's what's called the inflation expectation and a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we focus on the negative, then we're going to find negative. If we focus on the positive, then we're going to find the positive, because it's in
Look,
the
there are
realm of
things called,
psychology.
you're an economist.
It's in the realm
there are
of
things
psychology
called
now.
ineluctable facts.
All right, okay.
It's not about what you
Not
focus
necessarily.
on. An ineluctable fact is that this table is red.
All right.
Okay, you can choose to focus on whatever else you want to focus
Right.
on, but an ineluctable fact is that the table is red.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about a lot of money coming from, the oil areas and so on. I mean, Nigeria's short to medium term economic outlook
Right.
hinges significantly on the government's ability to increase crude oil production to meet Nigeria's OPEC quota, doesn't it? In other words,
Well,
for you to get a lot of that revenue, a significant amount of it must come from an increase in crude oil, because that is essential for boosting revenue,
which is also doing well,
and
even
for
though-
alleviating fiscal pressures.
even
How is
though-
that doing? How
Even
is
though,
that
yes, you're
successful?
right, but perhaps not as skewed as what we used to have before. Because again, the game has changed. We're now a refining country. We need as much locally to refine than to just push out into the markets. Initially, we had some issues with contracts that had been signed, but it seems like the pressure on that is also reducing. And that's why you can see already prices of petroleum falling within the country. So whereas it's valid that, look, the more we can produce, and I say, why not? We have made a projection to produce an average of 2.05 million barrels per day, okay, this year, in this year's budget, and people think it's not achievable. We may not be there yet. We're around 1.7 million barrels to 1.8 million barrels a day. We're actually fulfilling that OPEC quota now. The figures are jiving. However, we are even more ambitious than that. So 2.05. But you see, in 1973 and 1974, we were doing that much. In 1973, we were doing 2.1 million barrels. In 1974, 2.05 million barrels per day. So this is 2025. We're a lot more educated now. We're a lot more aggressive. We got a lot more population. We have every point to prove. So why can we not do that? And I think that we're actually looking that sector. We're looking at at some point taking up production up to 4 million barrels a day.
Right.
However, we're in a diversified economy, and so we're not basically focusing on petroleum anymore that much, but to have a much more robust economy. And 95.4% of the economy of our GDP, the last year, is non-oil. Only 4.6% was done by oil. So that's the kind of thing we're looking at, going forward. And the trade surpluses I mentioned earlier is driven by non-oil. 5 consecutive quarters since the beginning of this government,
right.
And that's the kind of numbers we've been seeing. So I would say that I'm here to convince you of that negative and rather pessimistic point of view, because indeed the numbers are changing on the street.
Right. Okay. Let's move away from that, and let me ask you.
Yeah. And interest rate. Let me make a point on interest rate before I land. I'm so sorry. So the way the interest rate is going to work is that now that you see that right now in the last 1 week, Treasury bills rates have been falling down to 14%. It was 21% at some point 2 weeks ago. So what that does is that because the inflation is now at 24.8%, and the CBN is trying to chase a positive interest rate to say that, look, our investment rates should be a little bit higher than inflation. Chances are that inflation is going to go down further with food prices falling, because food is the key driver of that inflation of that. Therefore, after a month or two, we begin to see a downward trend in inflation.
Okay, let me come to sort of structural things that are important. There are ongoing efforts to rebase the GDP.
Oh, yes.
How important is that as a step towards accurately capturing the true picture of Nigeria's economic performance?
Fantastic. It's also part of the whole, shebang, of where we're trying to get to. The World Bank recommends 5-yearly rebasing for economy, especially economies like ours. Is what we need to do 5 years. For the more developed economy, they rebase in real time, meaning that on a daily basis they know where everything is. But we don't have that infrastructure for now. However, we haven't done the needful in 11 years. So we're 6 years behind the curve. And so this rebasing is very, very critical when it comes out. So for one key reason, it's like a company, after running a company and acquiring assets over time, you want to, from time to time, revalue your assets. So your building you could have bought for ₦1 million, but it's now where it's sitting is 50 million naira. If you could revalue that property and know that this is a valuable property, then your balance sheet begins to look much, much better.
Okay, look,
so,
that's
what we're doing with the
I've got a minute
of the GDP.
I've got a minute, and please try and limit it to that.
Right.
Will the outcomes in 2025 be within, above, or below your expectations?
It'll be well. It'll be above my expectation, even though I'm a very
not even within your expectation, but above.
I'm an optimistic person. I think that inflation is going to. I think that wage inflation is going to go below 15% by December, maybe 14 or 13%. I think that. The GDP growth rate of 4.6%, yes, we could keep to that, but in the next year, we'll probably be looking at 5%, 5.5%. I think we're really going to turn the corner. I think interest rates will begin to, taper down pretty much soon, but that may end because we're talking about 27.5% in NPR now. We expect that the central bank will begin to look at bringing down interest rates considerably to maybe the 20% region by the end of this year. So I'm very, very bullish about this economy. I'm very optimistic. And I tell you once more, Mr. Charles, prices are falling.
Okay, on that note, I want to thank you for the moment very much indeed. Tope Fasua is President Tinubu's Special Advisor on Economic Affairs, holding court rather robustly there.
Thank you.